Genuine Media, and is our convo over coffee this morning. And we have a really, I think we have a great conversation for small business owners today. Now, a convo over coffee, we focus here on helping small businesses using video with staying connected and connecting audiences and in their marketing efforts and really doing it in a way that is very very genuine, of course, because genuine media. But with our current circumstances, we are looking at a couple different topics that are a little more timely in for small businesses here. And so we're going to be looking at really specifically today the SBA Disaster Relief Loan programs that are available, and really positioning us as small businesses to be able to come out the other end and do things that we were doing before, be able to continue and grow our businesses beyond this shutdown, which will end sometime very soon. So to that, I have invited a gentleman here from a local company, AA Employer Services, that he has his MBA out of the University of Redlands, really 13 years experience with a company that provides services, payroll services, insurance services, human resources for the small businesses that aren't big enough or have the resources themselves to actually have a human resources side to their company. So I'm bringing today my guest, Scott Riley. Welcome, Scott. Let's bring you in here. There
Hi.
You are. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm really glad that you could join us here this morning. Just because so many people we're kind of learning about each other here. Just to get to know you a little bit over our coffee. I do have my coffee. I don't know if you brought yours, but
I do too. A little iced coffee here.
All right. So
So
we're always having the convo over coffee. So just a little bit about yourself, Scott. Are you born here? Did you grow up here in Southern California?
I was born in Illinois originally. My parents moved out here when I was 4. And I've basically been a Southern California kid ever since. We've lived in basically the same city ever since. But went to Whittier College after that. Got my undergrad at Whittier. After graduating there, I got a math degree there. Thought I was going to go into teaching and coaching. That was something that I really had a passion for. And when college was over, and this is a family-owned business, my mom and dad own the business, and it was one of those things like, do I want to focus on this and help them, or do I want to focus on teaching and coaching? And it made a lot of sense I found a lot as I was going to school. I was working here too, and I just acquired a passion for helping people. And I feel like I'm in a really good place here to be able to help people. For example, a lot of my clients are reaching out now, just trying to ask questions, see what I know, see what I can find out, things like that. It's just kind of nice to be that, helping hand to small business owners, because, most of my clients are, work in their business and are very good at what they do, but don't necessarily know how to navigate the world of having employees or dealing with these other things. So I like to be that extra helping hand for them.
Well, and being in that position in what you're doing is absolutely necessary for small businesses like myself. So,
right.
So helping, that's probably why you love doing it so much, because you love helping.
It's that service, that, the acts of service. That's something that, it's come easy to me. My parents have, that's how they've grown in their business. We have, I would say, just over 100 clients throughout the state of California. And what we do is just offer them more than just payroll, be able to kind of help them through difficult times with employees or have questions business related wise. We're kind of that, for lack of a better term, therapist for them. So we, our phones are always open. They're always calling, asking questions. And, that's kind of how we've grown our business through networking through our own clients, because they know what we do. It's just so different and just so much more hands-on than your big box stores that just kind of process payroll. So that's kind of how we've built our company up by being that extra and being that extra helping hand. So that's kind of where we've found success there, and it just helps because it's two things that we just really want to help. We want to help people.
Well, I think that's really good because today, really, we find ourselves in this pandemic situation,
Right.
right? And really, small businesses, we're trying to figure out how to stay in business, and at the same time, how to help our employees
Yeah, it's tough.
weather the storm. Right? I mean, it's so tough on both sides, and there's so many layers to what are going on. And we know that the legislature, of course, passed the disaster relief. And let's start at the 30,000 foot level. Let's put a fence around what is available. So what is this COVID economic injury relief disaster program, and what's really available for a small business?
So currently the disaster plan is broken up in two parts. There's a loan for your a disaster side loan. Off the top of my head, there's I'm sorry, I lost track of the actual acronym, but basically that's what everyone was doing early when people were trying to apply straight to the SBA side of the loan, just to SBA directly. And then as of last Thursday, the other side of that loan, or that loan program, came out with the payment or the payroll protection plans. So that's basically that was to try to help float companies for the next 2.5 months. That was the idea with the payroll protection, is to act as for lack of a better term, the unemployment for the potential unemployment for the next 2.5 months, where people can apply for that loan, get the wages, get the amount of monies that they would be need to get through the next 2 months without necessarily having to lay their employees off and have them go through unemployment, and try to keep things moving forward until we can get to the other end of this. That was kind of my opinion, the thought process of, if we can get this money to the employers directly, then those employers, as long as they continue to pay their employees that money, then it relieves a lot of stress off the potential unemployment. And if we can just get to the other end of the 2 months, then that's what that loan is for.
Okay, so it was really to help keep people from actually jumping to unemployment or having to furlough or lay off employees.
If an employer was kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, where either slow or don't have the the business to continue to pay people, this was to basically, if we can get this money to the employers directly, tell them that they need to use this on paying their employees, putting a lot of stipulations on making sure the employees are paid and there's no change to employment. This kind of will weather the storm, is the idea, is it weathering the storm over the next few months.
And yet we find ourselves in this position where I've seen and heard that with the rising unemployment numbers, so many companies were forced to furlough or put people like in a layoff position, and so there's all these unemployment going on. So how does this move forward then, do you think?
That's a tricky question that there's not a lot of answers to currently. So the idea of the loan was, or the way it comes out, is the loan is going to be paid back by the government. That's the goal. Is if I, for example, loan out and I get 10 grand to pay my employees for the next few months or whatever it is, or up to $10 million. The idea is, if I can prove that I use that money on paying my employees, the government would pay off that loan for us, or that loan would be basically written off. My issue that I'm running into with my clients is some of them can't wait any longer. And right now they're saying, okay, well, I don't have the funds to continue to pay them. I need to furlough them. I need to do some unemployment. I need them to make sure that they can keep their lights on and all that kind of stuff. So what the idea would be is, once you get those funds, is to go back to normal as soon as possible. My clients, I would say 90%, 95% of my phone calls are dealing with this. So I'm talking to a lot of people. I do know that, a Unfortunately, no one's really received this money yet. I have a handful of clients that have been told by their banks that they are approved, but no one's actually seen the funds yet. So that's a little scary, and they're trying to figure out what that looks like. So a few of them, have, the money just sitting there to be able to get through these rainy days, and a few don't, which is sad. But the goal is to get your stuff in, get your processing going. So when you do get those funds, you bring those employees back as soon as possible. And as long as you can prove the 8 weeks that you paid your employees for the 8 weeks, then technically that loan will be forgiven by the government. That's the goal.
Okay, so this is really an attempt to keep people employed as long as possible and keep them
Correct.
off the unemployment cycle, as
Correct.
it were.
And then and I'm sure the idea would be, you're going to your bank to do the underwriting. So the government has basically pushed all the underwriting for these loans to your local bank. So I'm telling all my clients that are asking me questions that don't know where to go or not sure what to do next, what they need to do is make a phone call to the bank that they do their processing with. That's the bank that you're going to have the relationship with. That's the bank that knows what you do as a business. That's the bank that will more easily be able to get you the funding. Because if you look at it from the bank's perspective, they're taking on all of the risk of writing the loans, but none of the reward of potentially you not being in business at the end of it to pay it back. And if the government decides that they're not going to pay it back, then these banks are going to be on the hook for it. So
Right.
Go to the bank that you have the relationships with, go to the bank that you have your deposits with. That's how you're going to be able to get the best customer service throughout all of this. I do know that there's a handful of banks that are processing loans for people that aren't necessarily banking with them. If that's something that people aren't 100% sure of, or, there are some worries out there that the bigger banks are going to run out of capital to pay these loans until the government starts paying them back for it. So there's something to think about with, if you are with the Bank of America, Chase, that kind of thing, to maybe reach out to a small local business bank close to you to ask them if they're going to be able to work with you, so you can maybe start that relationship too, because at some point these bigger banks that are nationwide are going to run out of the amount of actual capital they have to be able to fund these loans. So just something to be aware of, that if you haven't gotten your paperwork in, if you haven't had these conversations with your banker, now's the time, because at some point, either A, the government's going to come with a step-by-step plan, which they haven't quite yet, of how these loans are going to be repaid back to the bank, which I'm sure they're working on, but we haven't heard yet. And then
Right.
B, if X amount of money is going to be loaned out, you want to make sure that you're in that X amount for each bank, or have options besides that. So all these other banks that I've talked to, or clients that I've talked to that are working with other banks that they don't bank with, they're all small business banks that are trying to grow relationships with businesses. So you can take advantage of that. I'm a big proponent of small banks. I feel like the small banks are much more helpful when it comes to these things, and you're not just a number. And so if you need help with this, there's a lot of smaller size banks that can help you through this process that maybe you wouldn't be able to be helped with Chase and B of A and things like that.
Right. So this really, it sounds like a very time sensitive side, the payroll relief side of the relief program is so people should be really moving on this if that's a concern.
Exactly. So starting last week, and on Thursday is when the requests started coming in from all of our clients. And what we've found is basically all of, what day is it? So yeah, all of this week is most of the banks are just collecting data and just collecting the reports and getting everything that you need. So reach out to your payroll expert, get into your QuickBooks if you use it, pull all of these reports that they're going to need, because my guess is it's going to go fast when it starts, when they start actually giving out these loans, and you want to be all your stuff there at the bank ready to go as they start processing these things.
So what are some of the reports
Sure.
that they should be preparing?
I've noticed that every bank's a little different, first and foremost. So all my clients are asking for something maybe a little different, or a time frame that's a little different. So that's important. Just reach out to the bank and they're going to give you a quick email of what they need. Every single one has asked for the quarterly reports, so the 941 reports. So those are quarterly tax reports for the last year, so four quarters of it. The 940 report, which is the federal unemployment. Basically, it shows how much wages you paid the year before. It's an easy report to show your total amount of wages that you paid over the last calendar year. And then payroll reports for certain pay periods. So like my bank asked us, the bank that I bank with asked us for basically 4/1 to 4/1, and I have most of my clients that are doing, January to January. And then, we do run into the problem where I have like 3 new clients that just started their own business, and they're running reports for the last 6-8 weeks to prove to the bank that, hey, I know I don't have any quarterlies yet until this year, but here's my proof of each week. This is what I'm running. This is the amount of monies that I'm paying out to my employees. Sadly, an awful time to start business because it's really hard to prove your wages or what you're trying to do for these people, or in this tech or whatever. So there's ways around it, as long as you are making the way I've heard it, and again, each bank is different. The way I've heard it, as long as you've been making payments to employees by February 1st, and you don't just start all of a sudden right now, that there should be enough data there for them to be able to at least look at and try to process a loan.
Okay. So now, kind of on the other side of this, you have the smaller boutique type businesses, or maybe the sole proprietors, the freelancers like myself. I don't have employees. I'm a sole proprietor. So what kind of help, if any, is available then for someone with a smaller business that doesn't have a payroll or isn't paying themselves like in a payroll fashion?
So in the loan, in the payroll protection loan, and that would be something that I would reach out to my banker directly. But in the payroll protection loan, sole proprietors, independent contractors, and basically any other type of self-owned business that are running yourself are included in that. And there's actually lines on the not in the application, but in the processing part of how much to ask for. So most banks are giving you a, for example, like an Excel spreadsheet that, as you put your wages in, you put your taxes in, you put your, if you cover health benefits, or if you cover any 401ks or anything like that, like all of what your costs for payroll are. And then there's another section right under it that says basically, what's the cost for your 1099s? What's the cost for you as a sole proprietor? What's the cost for you as someone who just is an independent contractor or like consultant? What are you basically paying yourself throughout the year? Even though you're not necessarily running wages through payroll, there's still disbursements to yourself in some way that you're saying, okay, this is what I run over the course of the year. This is what I pull out of my business to pay for my life. And those are the things that are actually included in this loan. And normally, if you talk to your banker will tell you how to fill that portion out. So like, for example, I've helped a couple people where they're, it's line by line in an Excel spreadsheet. What does this cost? What does this cost? What does this cost? Then it spits out your monthly average, and then it spits out, 2.5 times that. And that's what your loan amount that the max loan amount that they'll give you is 2.5 times your payroll average.
Okay. So that's good to know, especially because when we're talking payroll, it often we feel a little left out, right? So
yeah, and I get that too. So, and a lot of people are calling and asking what does that sound like? What do I need to do? And normally, if you're doing the income taxes correctly, there's lines on your income taxes that show how much you're pulling out every year, how much how much, not necessarily wages, but the, your income from the business to continue to pay for your life. And that's kind of the goal, is to try to get you guys people that are bringing in money and get them paid to just get through the next 2 months. Obviously that loan for, an owner that just pays themselves, won't be nearly as large as somebody who has 10, 15 employees, but it
Right.
doesn't mean that there's not an opportunity there for you. It's just you have to go through the steps.
Okay.
Now, how do we prove, what is the bank going to do, ask for to prove that you need these wages or that you pay yourself this much every month? I don't know. I'm not necessarily in on that part of those questions and where that goes, because people are reaching out to me and asking me for what the payroll reports look like. But I do know that there's options for those questions. It's just a matter of asking the right people.
Right. So that's get to your bank and have the conversation with your banker.
Correct.
Okay. So so that's one side of this relief. The other side you talked about, you mentioned were the loans. And I'm presuming that includes where the $10,000 grant
That's
side is.
and that seems to be needed to be done through the SBA website, the actual SBA.gov website. Sadly, I have not heard a lot of success yet from there. I do know of one or two. Yes, that's it. One or two clients that have been given small portions of what they need to get moving, because they one of them owns a few locations, and I think has already had already started that process like immediately when all this started coming out. But in general, I would say 90% of my clients have logged in, filled everything out, and a very small percentage have seen anything from that yet. My thing with all of this is, yes, obviously that's important and something that to not forget about, and really focus on making sure you do what you need to do through the SBA website. But really, the goal is, or I would say the goal from the conversation would be, you need to really focus on the payroll protection side. That's going to be the side that'll be the one that's going to get you through the next 2 months. That's going to hopefully have some quicker success of actually getting funds into your guys' bank accounts, because using the banks as the underwriters, for lack of a better term, is just allowing more hands on deck to get this money out. And I feel like every small business, probably, I would say, most small businesses have already looked into filling out the SBA loan website and trying to figure out what they can and can't get from the SBA loan. And I don't think they have enough people there to be able to process all those loans in a timely manner. So by kind of pushing some of this stuff to the banks, at least I think that's where we're going to see the funds come first. And I just don't know what the SBA loan and how long that's going to take, and what kind of funds do we think we're going to get from those loans. I don't know, and I don't know if anyone really does. It's just, we have to go through the steps, we have to jump through the hoops, and we'll figure out what the next 2 weeks look like. And we just don't want to be sitting here 2 weeks from now not doing anything and then going, oh God, I do need this money. Right. Internally, just to give you like a little peek behind our curtain, we aren't necessarily needing anything currently right now. We're very lucky. Our percentage of payroll that's down is only about 9.5% based on the numbers that we ran, which is huge for us. In terms of actual clients running, they might not necessarily running as much in terms of wages, but in terms of actual clients still trying to pay their employees, still attempting to find a way to do things the right, to make sure that their employees have some funds, or whether they're going to split shifts, skeleton crews, things like that. They're still running payroll. But like I said, we don't necessarily need it currently right now, but I just don't know what the next 2 weeks look like. And I would hate to look 2 weeks from now and say, oh, I didn't turn in the stuff and I missed out on the opportunity, because the worst thing that happens is that money sits in a bank account for me, and the bank says, oh, you didn't use it for the payroll that you thought you were going to do or whatever, and I give it back. And whatever, I pay a little bit of interest. If that's the case, that's fine with me. But if I have to end up, if I have this money sitting here, or, whatever it is, and I don't use it, then so be it. But if I do need it, or if my, my staff or my crew needs it in some way, it's there, it's ready to go, and I don't have to necessarily be scrounging, for it.
So it almost sounds like the payroll side of it is really the immediate stopgap, and then the SBA is really more for a little longer term kind of approach if there's funds needed
Yeah,
in a longer term type of need.
that seems like that would be the idea of like the second part of that loan, or the SBA part is more to like clean up whatever whatever missed income you might be having over the last 2 months, to be able to keep things moving and keep things going forward, to try to catch up and bridge that gap as fast as possible. But yeah, it seems as if the payroll side is going to be more active at the moment, and then the more of the disaster relief side, again, I haven't heard much of when or how fast or anything. Like, I could be dead wrong and things could start happening tomorrow. But as far as the little that I do know, it seems as if, based on the conversation I'm having with my clients, is the payroll protection side is getting approved, or the reports are getting collected. A few have already had approval, and it's just a matter of when do the funds come through. I had a client talk to me yesterday that basically said that he was going to receive a call from the bank today to tell him the new timeline. So he's been approved for about 3 or 4 days, but he doesn't know the timeline of actually getting those funds yet, and he should have a timeline today. So that gives you an idea of, even though approval comes, it could still be 4 or 5 days after before we even get an idea of when those funds will start being released.
Right.
So, and then my thing with the release fund, so I really want, and I'm telling all my clients to really protect themselves with this money. If they assume that it's going to be, written off, I've been telling all of my clients to open up a new bank account, basically call it, payroll protection, whatever you guys want to call it, but basically have your own payroll account that you can track every dime that comes out of there. So if the IRS says, if the government says, oh, you didn't use this the way you said you were gonna, and if you just put it into, for lack of a better term, the pot of what you use everything else for, it could be difficult to prove going line by line. But if I have a account with my bank that's just payroll related costs, and I only let those payroll related costs go through that account, then it's much easier to prove if, God forbid, they go, well, we need to see line by line of how you spent that money. Because none of us know how they're going to prove whether Johnny spent the money on payroll, or did he spend it on this or that, or if he got rid of 2 employees, then is it prorated? Which I heard that was a thing too, that if you had 10 employees, you got the money for 10 employees, but you went down to 8, then the 8 employees were written off. The equivalent of the 8 employees were going to be written off, and then you would owe back the 2. Again, I just feel like there's a lot of questions still to be answered with what this looks like on the repayment side. But I have told all my clients to just put that money in a bank account that you don't use for anything else besides payroll for the next 2 months. And you have to use it in a 2-month period. So use it for payroll, use it for these things, and make sure that you've protected yourself to be able to check off everything that the government needs to have it written off.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that makes sense. I mean, that's just being wise,
right?
In terms of making it easy on, 4 or 5 years from now, which is probably where it's going to show up, right?
Yeah, well, the payment protection loans are 24-month loans currently, or something like that. And again, I'm not sure which, because so many things are coming out. But the initial thought was the payroll protection loans were a 24-month loan that basically need to be paid back in 24 months from the bank. And then obviously, if it was used correctly, then it wouldn't be due. But so it could be as early as 2 years from now, if those funds aren't used correctly, or if every box isn't checked and that money isn't necessarily written off, that's when those monies would probably be due.
So in terms then, if an employer then is looking to help his employees, right? And it's really up to him at this point to determine, can he continue his payroll until he's funded, possibly with this, or at some point, if they have to furlough and then come back, then what do we say to an employer like that? Is it just start the process and do as you can when you can do it, or what are you telling employers at this point in regards to that?
Well, everything that we're talking about with most of my clients is what decisions do we need to make today to make sure our doors are open in 2 months. So,
Mm,
because it doesn't do us any good to go through these steps to try to collect some money from the government and know that you can't pay your employees unless you do, and then end up owing that money anyways if we don't do it correctly, and barely being able to keep the doors open. So if the decision is sadly, if the decision is between laying the person off, letting them collect unemployment, and you being able to have a job for them in 2 months, then that's what you need to do. The goal. It would not make sense for us to put all of our every dime that we have into paying our employees if in 3 weeks we won't have anything. And I worry that we have to make decisions based on keeping the doors open for an extended period of time and not just for the next 4 weeks. That's why making sure that the payroll protection loan is filled out, because that's what it's for. That's what it's hopefully for, to help alleviate those awful decisions of having to figure out whether I can have my employees here or find ways to keep everyone working. But I have a lot of clients that are doing, instead of 40-hour weeks, 20-hour weeks for everyone, having giving them more days off during the week, or different crews coming in. So it's just trying to find the best way for some of these blue collar people that just aren't working right now to keep the doors open. And sometimes unfortunately, that's what the unemployment's there for. That's why there's so much money that was added to the unemployment sector, because they know people, unfortunately, just don't have the funds to continue to run payroll, to continue to pay their employees if they're not bringing in income. And
mhm.
when it comes to small businesses and what who we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, they are collecting money on Monday to pay their employees on Wednesday. And if they don't collect that money on Monday, sometimes it needs, it's trying to figure out a way to get, whatever they need to make sure the money's there to pay their employees, or make adjustments because they don't have the funds on correctly or enough to pay their employees. So they end up having to write them checks instead of us direct depositing them or stuff like that. And that's happening when times are good, because just in
Mm.
general, most of these small businesses are really working on small margins as it is. So to not have the normal income coming in at a auto repair place, makes it really tough to pay the technicians when they're working on small enough margins as it is.
So how does because we had a conversation earlier, how does sick pay um, fall into this? I mean, if someone is sick and they get the virus and can't
Correct.
work, or if I know some employers are resorting to, well, let's use up the vacation and sick
Sure.
pay kind of thing. How does that work in here?
So if I'm sick and need to be quarantined, if a family member's sick and need to be quarantined, something like of that nature, the government has approved for every employer under 500 employees to pay up to 80 hours of sick pay to that employee based on how many hours they normally work. So if I was like a part-time employee, it wouldn't necessarily be up to 80. There's actually a mathematical equation of how to figure out how much each person gets. So let's just say everyone's working full time, and I have to stay home and I have to quarantine for 2 weeks. There's a special sick plan built by the government that is giving dollar for dollar wages back on quarterly reports. So what that looks like exactly, we don't know, again, but what I've heard is, and what we if you need to track these wages on a different class code or a different pay code, and those wages actually are going to come off your 941 at the end of the quarter in some fashion. We don't know if they're going to have to create a new form for that, an additional form of how much you paid in these wages, those kind of things to add to the 941. We're still waiting for that, but that 941 is, where you track your how much you paid your employees, how much Social Security you paid on their behalf, how much Medicare you paid on your behalf, and how much income tax you paid on your behalf. So if I paid $1,000 to these employees and I owed 10 for whatever for that 941 throughout
Mm-hmm.
quarter, then technically, based on what I'm reading and what I'm understanding, is that number will actually come down to 9,000 that you owe. So you're fronting the money, but you should be getting paid back dollar for dollar if someone needs to use that for those sick time. Now, on the other hand of that question, where you said people are kind of getting creative, using their PTO, using their vacation, using the sick time that they have on file, I think that's a great idea to pay employees that are already, wages that they already have earned, that you technically owe them anyways. If you were to lay them off, in general, those monies would be due to them anyways. So let's say if I had 80 hours of paid time off sitting there, and I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to pay, or I wouldn't be able to get paid, I would then owe myself the 80 hours at time of termination or layoff anyways, if I had no intention of, or not knowing when I was going to come back. So if I would assume most people would be like, oh, well, we're only going to lay somebody off for this small time period. But there are other conversations of people like, I don't know when I'm going to get back on my feet. I don't know if I'll be able to bring you back. And those are the things like, if that's the case, then we need to make sure that these employees are paid out everything they're due, which at the back end is like, this is the reason why I'm getting rid of them, is because I don't have the monies to pay them. So long story short, it makes it a lot easier to just pay them 40 hours for that week that they would be getting anyways if you had to lay them off. And hopefully by the end of the next week, we have better news, things are moving forward, whatever. Or the payroll protection plan comes through.
Okay. So in terms of then just kind of recapping a little bit, because at this point, the things that employers can be doing, like to move themselves forward this week, is really pulling their reports together, connecting with their local bank.
Correct.
And could you kind of give us like a quick summary one more time on what can they do this week?
If I haven't done anything yet, my first phone call after watching this would be calling my banker, calling whoever I have a relationship with, telling them that I'm interested in this loan and what do I need to do next. They have everything pretty much dialed in where they're going to send you an email with everything you need. And at that point, then you can then get with your payroll processor, get with the person that finishes your reports, get with your CPA, whoever has these things for you, and start putting together your packet, getting your stuff together, getting your information together, filling out what you need to fill out, so then you can get that back to the banker, so you can basically get put in line. And then at that point, it's a waiting game, unfortunately. So as we put all this stuff together for our clients and make sure that they have the reports they need and help fill them out, there's a lot of questions in how to figure out your monthly income and things like that. But the goal is just make the phone call to the banker, start working on your reports, and getting that stuff back to the banker so you get yourself put in line. And then if I'm with a big bank right now, I am going to call and reach out to other business banks in my area, because I just don't want to be left where I may have missed the boat. Because I know Bank of America was one of the first banks that really, from what I've heard, had the process in place, and they were taking documents as of Friday morning early of last week when this all was explained to people. And it's been they've been very good about running and getting a lot of documents in and starting to this approval process. Well, because they're so big, I can only imagine that they're going to run out of funds at some point and run out of capital at some point to be able to feel comfortable loaning out. So,
right.
So if I was with a big bank, that's only one of the big banks that probably have a very similar story, that I would be reaching out and saying, hey, just in my area, I know that there's, SunWest Bank in Irvine, I heard that is doing that. There's a community bank. Gosh dang it, I forgot the name of it. But one of my clients actually is looking to switch because this particular small bank was really helpful during this process, and now he's going to actually end up switching to this bank full time because of how helpful they've been. So reach out to a smaller business bank, just in your neighborhood, to see if they're giving out these loans, even if you don't have a relationship with, or the idea of maybe moving your relationship to them so you can get some funds.
And if people are wanting to stay up to date on the programs and the things that are happening, what is their best resource that they might be going to?
That's a really good question. The way I'm staying up is we have our software program is sending us stuff all the time, and just what's up to date, what's new. A lot of other thing, I'm just checking the government websites and their updates, and trying to just figure out where they're at and what has changed. And then my like surefire way is just I keep in touch with my clients that are dealing with this, and then I'm just gathering intel based on what they're telling me, because unfortunately there's just not a lot of information except for using the government websites and things like that. But the easiest way for me to stay up on it is really talking to the clients that are dealing with it, because that's the front line of where we're at and what they're dealing with. And just because it says somewhere else that things are happening or things are moving down the road, I'll know when my clients actually start getting funds.
Right. Okay. Well, is there anything else that you think we should know in this whole process?
No, I told you I would talk a lot.
Yes, but I think that so much of what you were able to bring us today is just so it's both timely and it's helpful, and obviously there are a lot of questions that we still have and that we don't know.
I mean, as much as I appreciate you reaching out to me and having me give you whatever I have learned over the last few weeks. I really appreciate you doing that. I'm still learning and I'm still figuring it out too. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of answers out there. So we're just all trying to kind of put our head down and get through the next few weeks and see what happens.
So if people had questions, if they wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way they can do that?
Well, first of all, my office is always open, so any one of your listeners or anyone can call me. And then did I give you my email address? Yeah, there we go. There's our that's our local number that you can call. We answer phones basically from 8 in the morning to 6 at night and sometimes later. So call in, and then my email address is Scott, SCOTT, at A as in Apple, employer, EMPLOYER.com. There it is. And any questions that you have, please send them my way. I will absolutely, if I don't, and just as a policy for our office, if we don't know the answer, we will find it. So if you have questions or if you're not sure if I might have the answer or don't have the answer, please reach out. We have a lot of support here that we can reach out to people that might have answers that we might not have.
All right. Well, Scott, we really appreciate that you would take the time to hang out with us this morning and just share really this rich amount of information. It's a lot more than, as a business owner, I'm out there trying to figure things out, and so to know that we have a resource like this and to be able to point people in the right direction, I think it's just been very helpful this morning. So really appreciate that you were able to join us this morning. Friends, next week we'll be having Erin Ludwig. She's an accountant consultant here in Orange County, and we'll be talking more about some of the tax implications and things here with the whole pandemic and what businesses can be doing to prepare for that as well. So you'll want to join us here next Thursday at 11 for that conversation. And with that, we're going to bring this to an end. And guys, have a fantastic day. Thanks for joining us.